Alright, welcome to another video of libgdx tutorial stuff, and today we are going to talk about XML parsing. And that's so ridiculously easy in libgdx that it's fun actually. So let's go ahead and create a new XML file that we want to parse by just selecting untitled text file. And I'm going to specify some root element called Sprite and close it. And then I'm going to save this as some libgdx desktop assets sprite.xml. Oh, well, that was not XML, that was XLM. I mean XML. Probably there was a wizard for it, but this way I just had to close it and open it up again, so I get some nice syntax highlighting. So we want to define a sprite in XML. How is this supposed to look in the end? Well, I have a test for this. It's going to look quite different, but whatever. Where is it? There we go. This is a sprite which texture is specified in the XML file. The color, the rotation, the position and the scale, they are all specified in the XML file and then loaded into the program, like just displayed in some way. And you can do just anything with it, but for the sake of simplicity we are just going to create such a sprite. So let's go ahead and define some things for our own sprite and not the one that I just showed you. So at first, the very essential thing of a sprite is its texture. So let's go ahead and say the texture is image Luigi front.png. I don't know what image you use, but I use that one. Also we can set some other stuff like the X position, which is going to be 200, and the Y position, which is going to be 300. Also we can specify a width. The width is going to be 200 as well, and the height 300. Or let's just say that's a really squished one, it's just 100, so we can see the effect. Then we can even do some other things. For example, such a sprite can have an origin, and instead of doing it the typical way, we are going, I mean this is pretty typical, it's just standard XML, but anyway we're going to define the origin X and Y also as attributes in a self-closing element, and this X is going to be 0 and the Y is going to be 50. Then we can define a scale. On X it's going to be scaled 1, so no scale at all. And on Y, oh no, let's actually say on X we'll scale it 0.5, and on Y we'll just let it how it is. Then we can define a color, for example, and that's just the same thing. R for red equals 1, very creative, so it's full red 255 or whatever, in which format you want to say it. Then green 0.5 and blue 0.7. Then we'll have some alpha, of course, don't forget the alpha. Then we'll have another element, and this element is going to be different from the other ones, but it's all simple. Parsing XML with libgdx is always simple. No matter what you do, you can't make it complicated. So let's say this is the rotation, and I just put the rotation in there like this because it would not make sense to have some attribute, because I'd have to give any name to this attribute to be able to specify a value for it. So I already have this rotation child element of the sprite element, which I give this value here that doesn't have to have a specific name. Okay, so this file is saved. Let's go ahead and try to parse it. For this I'm going to create a new class and call that one XML parsing tutorial. The interface is going to be screen, and there we go. Of course, to display the sprite we actually need some kind of sprite batch or however you want to render your stuff. But in libgdx, Sprite batch is pretty much the only way, also the pretty much only sane way. And we need the sprite that we want to create from the XML file to pass. So sprite. I'm sorry. Okay, then we need to dispose the batch. Dispose, I said. And since we create the texture from the XML file right here, we load it from this string, we also know that it's not going to be used anywhere else, so we should go ahead and get it from the sprite so we can dispose it. Okay, in the show method we want to create a new sprite batch and do all the typical render stuff, gdx.gl.gl clear, gl2.0.gl color buffer bit, then batch.begin and batch.end, and format this properly. And then we would also like to actually draw the sprite onto the sprite batch. Okay, so now we have everything set up how we need it, but the essential thing is missing, and that is actually creating the sprite from the XML file. So now we'll get to the real thing and create an XML reader. I'm just going to call that one XML and make it equal to a new XML reader taking no arguments in its constructor. Of course I have to XML to import the correct one. And now we can already go ahead and have a look at the Sprite XML file again. So just to make this absolutely clear, to be absolutely sure about what we are doing here, the structure of an XML file, how you might already know, is we have elements, and these elements can have attributes, and these attributes can have values, and that's what we're doing pretty much all the time right here, except this one here. These are all child elements of the Sprite root element, and every XML file has such a root element, and you can pretty much name it whatever you want. I just called it Sprite. Yeah, so from this Sprite root element we can get the children, in this case origin, scale, color, and rotation, and these children again have attributes. They don't need to have attributes. For example, rotation doesn't have any attributes, it just has its value called with value of 75. These children of course could contain children as well, but for the Sprite that's definitely not necessary, and I think you also know the concept, but just be sure about the terms element, attribute, value, and value that's not, I don't know, part of any attribute. It's just the value of the child. So, okay, now that we are sure that we understood this, we can go ahead and create our first element, and this is going to be the root element, which, like I said, in this case is the Sprite. So we can just say element.get root, give this the XML reader, and say pass. So now there are a few methods that we can pass some stuff. We could give it an input stream or a reader, or the pure XML just as a string, or pass a char array of data with all kinds of stuff, whatever you want to do. But I think it's most common to just pass from a GDX file handle, just how I used to, and this is an internal file called sprite.xml, and there we go. We now have the root element. Of course we have to import it, and what's that? We have to surround this with a try catch, because it might be that this XML pass thing here doesn't find this XML file, so that would give us an IO exception. But anyway, you should also be familiar with try and catch stuff. That's all Java. Okay, so we have the root element, and actually we can cut this down, take the XML parser out of there, and just put it there, because we won't ever need the XML parser again. From the root element we have everything we need, because it contains everything else. So let's actually stop talking crap and create a new Sprite. and that new sprite needs a texture, and this means we should go ahead and create a texture, and this texture takes in its constructor a string which is the path to the to the actual image, and that is going to be the string path, and the string path is going to be, now this is the actual XML part, root.get. And now what do we want to get? We look in here again, and we know that the texture is an attribute of the element, of the root element, and we want to get the value of the texture attribute of the root element. So let's go ahead and say root.get attribute. We could do this, but it's unnecessary. Why would you need to get the attribute if you can just say get? And we have multiple ways of saying get again. We could say get with the name, or get with a name and the default value that it returns in case it doesn't find this. So we already know that the texture attribute does exist in this root element sprite. So let's just say root.get texture, and we're done. We are not just getting the attribute with it, we are immediately getting its value, because there's not much else that you can do with such an attribute. So there we go. Root.get pretty much means from the root element get the value of this attribute. It's actually pretty simple. So let's just take this out of here and move it in there. And why would we leave it like this if we can take this out of here and move it in there? So it looks absolutely awesome. Okay, so we have the sprite created. Let me just think about something. Yeah, that's actually pretty perfect. Okay, so now we want to specify some other stuff that we can set to the sprite. So we have this sprite.setPosition method taken an x and a y value, which are floats. Again, we can do the same thing. We can say we want to get the x attribute with a value 200. Well, we don't know the value yet, so we can just say we want to get the value of the x attribute of the sprite element, and the sprite element is called root. So we just say get, and it already tells us there is this useful getFloat method which returns the value of the attribute cast to a float. I mean, you can't really cast a string to a float, but it passes this to a float. If not possible, we'll get some kind of exception. But anyway, we can just say getFloat and specify the name of the attribute, which is x, and root.getFloat, and the name of the other one is y. And that is all we need to do. It's this simple. Then we, oops, what did I just do? Then we have some other methods of the sprite, for example, set size, and that also takes two floats, and we can get them the exact same way, just by saying root.getFloat width and root.getFloat height. That's it. It's automatically converting or whatever the value of the attribute width to a float from the element root. And I think I've said this plenty of times, so let's just go ahead and set the origin real quick. Oh! What am I doing? We want to set the origin of the sprite, okay? So set origin. And it's also taken an origin x and an origin y. But how do we get those? Because if we have a look at the XML again, we actually took care of all of them already. So I don't know what I've been thinking. But the origin is another element, a child element of the root element. So we have to get this element first to be able to assess its attributes. So let's say element origin equals root.getChild, And now we have the choice to say we want to get the child by its index in the kind of child array, in child list or whatever, by its index, or we want to get the child by its name. We want to get the child by its name but searching for the recursive. We can get the count of children, but whatever, and we can even get multiple children by their name if they have the same, but we just have one child with one name, so we use the simplest one of all these methods and say get child by name origin. Now we are left with one more simple element, and from this element we can say sprite.set origin dot float again x. Now origin dot get float y. That's it. It's really so freaking simple. It's awesome. I love XML. Okay, so what else do we have? We have the scale and the color. Again, these are just children of the root element with their own attributes. So we can do the exact same thing. Element, scale and color. Okay, scale equals root.getChild by name, scale, and we can go ahead and create the color one as well. Color equals root.getChild by name, color. So now we have two elements more and can do all kinds of stuff with them. For example, sprite.set scale, which is now the element that I just created up there. Scale.getFloat x, and there we go. Scale has the x attribute with a value 0.5. So the same thing for the y-axis. Scale.getFloat y. That's it. Then we can set the color of the sprite, and this is going to be color.getFloat r. Color.getFloat b. Color.getFloat RB. Actually, the B comes right there, and here's the G, but whatever. And then color.getFloat A. Close the parentheses, and we're done. Okay, so now there's just one thing that we have left to do, and that is we took care of all of these attributes. We took care of all of these children and their attributes. The only thing that we did not take care of yet is the rotation. And the rotation, even though it is different now, is even simpler than what we did. It's basically exactly as simple as the first thing that we did, because the rotation might not be an attribute of the root element, but it is a child of the root element specifying only one value. We don't have to give this attribute, which doesn't exist, it isn't an attribute, but we don't have to specify an attribute, give the name in order to be able to specify a value. We can just write the value right in there, because there's just one value anyway, so we don't have trouble to see which value is what. So we don't even have to get the rotation child, because we can just look, is there a, well, I'll just write it out first. So it's this simple: sprite.set rotation root.getFloat, again just root.getFloat rotation. Well, that's a funny word actually. Rotation, cool. I should remember that. But anyway, rotation, and we're done. That's it. Because what did we usually do if we said root.getFloat? Here we said root.getFloat x. So we went into the root element and had a look through its attributes, where we found the element x, and then we took its value. But now if we say root.getFloat rotation, we'll be going into the root element, checking all its attributes, don't find any rotation and the program crashes and the world's over. No, we don't find the attribute rotation in there. So we go and search through all of its children, and there is the rotation child. And since this rotation child only specifies one value, we don't even have to say which attribute of the child we want to get. It just has one value that it can possibly hold in any way. So the value is 75. And that's it. We're done. We can go home and our program is finished. I'll just save this and start this up again. And hopefully I'll not get an exception. And I didn't. There we go. Luigi floating around with all the kind of transformations or whatever awful things we did to him. Loaded from an XML file right into our game. Like this you could store all kinds of entities. If you're using an entity system, this is awesome. You can store any entities in XML files and create awesome entities like that. You can basically store everything and just parse it. Have a look at how much code we wrote. We basically wrote nothing. We just said, basically just said get, 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 and then what we wanted, and we have it. It's this awesome. So that's why I like XML, even though I don't really have a use case for it yet. It's awesome. So okay, thanks for watching this episode. I hope I understood. I understood. Well, I hope I did as well. But I hope you understood everything properly, and I didn't make you go insane with whatever. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll hopefully see you in the next tutorial, and until then, have a great time programming and be awesome.